Volume 2 of this diary for sale at the back, if anybody hasn't read it already. I can thoroughly recommend it. It'll give you an insight into my peculiar life and the odd things and coincidences that have happened, which include, I think, in this volume, it includes singing in Tom Campbell's funeral the day before 9/11. It was the day after 9/11. There was sound checking in Coniston Church as the Twin Towers collapsed. That was a very strange day. And it also includes the interesting diversion of the 747 airliner we were on so that the FBI could arrest Cat Stevens. We were supposed to be going to Mexico City, and we ended up somewhere else entirely. It took us 48 hours to get to Mexico. But it also includes how I came to meet the first man on the moon, Neil Armstrong. I'd met his son, Rick, outside a gig in the street in Columbus, Ohio, some years earlier, and we'd become friends. And Rick called me up one day and he said, me and my dad are coming to play golf in Scotland, and we've got to change airports. We're flying into Gatwick and then we've got to carry on from Heathrow. So if you'd like to meet my dad, do you want to come over to Heathrow? So I said, yes, I'd like to meet him very much. And this was Sunday the 11th of June in the year 2000, which is kind of interesting because my little boy, Emil, was born on the 11th of June some years later, and I only noticed that today. Can you all see me from here? Yeah. Do I look important? Do I look important now? Right, here we go. The alarm shook us both out of deep sleep at 7:15. Much too early to be getting up on a Sunday. Our Sundays are usually fairly laid-back affairs these days, mooching round the house and waking up slowly while the kids watch a video on TV. But today, coincidence had brought us something very exciting in prospect. Upon his suggestion, I had arranged to meet Rick Armstrong, who would be on his way to Scotland from Cincinnati for a week's golfing holiday with his dad, Neil Armstrong, the internationally renowned astronaut, and of course, the first man to set foot on the moon. They were arriving at Gatwick and then taking the bus to Heathrow for the onward flight to Glasgow, so I had arranged for us all to meet up with him in Terminal 1 at 9:30. To say the Armstrongs are keen golfers would be something of an understatement. I suppose they must be to endure an almost 24-hour journey to the first tee. I just don't get it. To get to Heathrow for 9:30, we were going to have to be away from the house by 8:30 latest. Sophie was staying over with a friend, that's my daughter. She was staying over with a friend in the next village, so I had to drive over and pick her up. Shortly after the alarm clock sounded, both Sue, my ex-wife now, I managed to put her off me permanently. It took a while, but I was up to the task, as I told you. Bless her heart. Anyway, I've lost my place now. I've been blinded by guilt.
Confession time.
Anyway, shortly after the alarm clock went off, I realised that neither of us knew where Sophie's friend lived, and we didn't have a number for her either. A typical Hogarth harebrained master plan developed, which involved yours truly staying in bed to think, while Sue ransacked Sophie's room in the hope of gaining clues as to her whereabouts. Fortunately, while I was thinking, the phone rang and it was Sophie to say she would meet me at 8 o'clock in the high street. So I threw some rags on and jumped in the car. When I arrived, I was greeted by 7 or 8 girls, still in their pyjamas, with sleeping bags and duvets wrapped around them, who had come to wave Sophie off. There was much giggling as we waved bye-bye, and then we returned home. Everyone bundled into the car, and we drove to Heathrow Terminal 1, parked the car, and arrived on time in the terminal at 9:30. No sign of Rick and Neil, though. We hung around for half an hour or more, wondering if we got the wrong end of the stick with the arrangements. Eventually, and to our relief, the boys appeared in the terminal looking somewhat anxious and perspiring under the weight of the golf clubs. There was a brief nod of greeting from Rick while Neil joined the queue at the check-in desk. Time was tight and they might not make the flight. Everything about this seemed bizarre to me. Neil Armstrong, for heaven's sake, flying to Gatwick, then sitting on a bus, and then queuing to board a flight from Heathrow to Glasgow. I would have expected him to be kind of carried around like the Pope. But no, he just lives like an ordinary chap. When he got to the front of the queue, I watched a disinterested check-in girl open his passport, read his name, look at his face, and check in the golf clubs and bags without raising an eyebrow. I felt like running over there and saying, "Have you any idea who this man is?" You'd have thought the name would have been a clue. Fame sure is a funny thing. Rick and Neil came over to us with bad news for them and excellent news for us. They had missed the connection and the next flight wasn't for another 2 hours. "Does anyone fancy brunch?" said that same voice which I had heard say one small step for a man all those years ago. So we went up onto the mezzanine balcony and sat down at a table in Garfunkel's. That's a restaurant. Don't know if they have them anymore. I sat next to Rick and Niall sat next to Neil. We ate pizza and salad while Niall, who at this point my son was about, I don't know, he would have been about, he was young. 8? Does anybody know? You've probably got more idea. He was about 8. What a shit father. We ate pizza and salad while Niall told the old man all about his new bicycle. Neil seemed genuinely fascinated by my little boy's story. What a lovely chap. I decided I'd be the first stranger he's ever met not to say, "So what was it like then?" Although every fibre of me was bursting to hear the moonshot firsthand. I'm a little proud that we didn't grill the guy. We just chatted away about the journey from Cincinnati to Gatwick and allowed everybody to relax. Eventually, Neil got around to reminiscing a little, not about Apollo 11, but about the picnic on the North Pole. Rick's not quite sure if this ever happened, but this is what he told me, honestly. I never hallucinated this. The test pilots in the astronaut program were an elite within the elite and were afforded the perk of being able to sign out a plane for leisurely pursuits on their days off. Neil and his fellow astronaut trainees decided it might be cool to have lunch on the North Pole. They requisitioned a plane with snow skids, packed the hampers, and flew there. He told us the smoothest ice is the ice nearest to the water, and so, having found a suitable place to land, they did so without incident and commenced unpacking and enjoying the picnic. At some point, we turned around to discover that the ice beneath the plane had softened and the plane had descended down into the ice. The wings were now ground level. He paused for a smile. "Well, fortunately, there are research stations at the North Pole, and we managed to explain our situation and hitch a ride home on another plane." "What happened to the plane you borrowed?" I asked. "Oh, it's still there. I guess it just carried on down." We chatted more about the balmy conspiracy theorists who don't believe Apollo 11 went to the moon. He just said, "I think Buzz ended up punching one guy out." and told us about the X-15 rocket plane which during earlier preliminary missions he had to fly back to Earth from the edge of space whilst bolted onto the underside wing of a B-52 bomber. That was a difficult one. I can't do the accent, especially not in... I've got to confess, actually, that Rick Armstrong is here with us tonight in the church, so I'm not going to try and impersonate his father's American accent. I'll have to do it in English. That was a difficult one. The wing